All right, welcome into the Auburn Live Basketball Show. I'm Justin Hokanson. With me, as always, is Jay Phillips. Jay, what's up, man? How you doing?
Doing pretty good, trying to reason with Auburn's loss from last night a little bit.
We will get into it. We will for sure get into it. Everybody go to auburnlive.com, subscribe. I think we have a deal going on. It's like $29.99. It gets you through next August, I believe. So go take advantage of that, auburnlive.com. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on the notifications. That would really, really help us, and we would greatly appreciate it. All right, Jay, let's get into this basketball game. Auburn 76-64 losers at Georgia in the first SEC road game of the season. Auburn's 1-1 now in conference, 11-3 overall, and they dropped to 1-2 now in true road games this season. I was there. Pretty good atmosphere, pretty good crowd, decent amount of Auburn fans that got in there. But Auburn really trailed from the jump. I think Auburn led for 14 seconds in this game, trailed for 38 plus minutes, and just got off to a bad start. You look at Auburn's numbers real quick. I'll go over the numbers real quick, and then you give me your reaction to the game. Auburn shot 35% from the field, 21% from three, 6 of 28. Shot 63% from the free throw line, 10 of 16. Georgia shot 45% from the field, 40% from three. Both teams actually hit the same amount of threes. Auburn just took 13 more. Georgia shot 69% from the free throw line. Georgia shot 16 more free throws than Auburn, making 12 more free throws, so 12 more points at the free throw line. Despite the fouls being basically even, if I remember correctly. I think it was a difference of one foul. Yeah, Georgia got 16 more free throws, just the way those fouls were happening. Everything else, man, there was a lot of even stats, honestly. Turnovers were both at 11. Points off turnovers were even. Auburn won the rebounding battle by 5. Auburn had 10 more offensive rebounds, but only 2 more second chance points. That's an issue. I mean, you look at 11 offensive rebounds for Georgia and 17 second chance points versus 21 offensive rebounds for Auburn and just 19 second chance points. So they were getting offensive rebounds, but they were not making the most of them. Bench points even, which is not good for Auburn. If you're even on bench points with a team like Georgia that's super average and trying to build that program, doesn't have the recruiting that you do and doesn't have the depth that you do, and you're tied in bench points with them, that's not going to get it done. Georgia had 36 points in the paint. Auburn had 28. So Auburn gave up 36 points in the paint. And that's even more disturbing when you look at how those points happened. I mean, Georgia's guards scored 43 points, but most of those points in the paint were driving to the basket. Auburn didn't get beat by posting, getting the post-up game from Georgia. It was driving to the basket from Georgia, downhill, back cuts, defensive deficiencies, really, and then everything else was pretty even. So really, it was just Auburn shooting 28 threes, couldn't hit a thing, didn't take advantage of second chance opportunities, and Georgia went to the foul line and got plus 12 on the foul line. Janai Broome, 22 points, 12 rebounds. Really good game from him. Did commit 4 turnovers. Some of those were really bad passes. But when you go for 22 and 12, you make up for your 4 turnovers in bad passes. Other than that, kind of a mess on offense. Alan Flanagan had a pretty productive game, 5 of 10, 11 points. But Jalen Williams, 1 of 9, 5 points. Wendell Green, 2 of 12, 7 points. Katie Johnson, 1 of 5, 3 points. Trey Donaldson, 0 for 3. Chris Moore 3 for 7 with 7 points. So it's just a mess, man. A mess offensively. And then every time Auburn tried to make a run in this thing, they got it down to 4 points a couple times in the second half. Georgia just would immediately push it back to 8 or more. And defensively, I think probably even more than offensively, Auburn just failed. 76 points to that Georgia team is not acceptable for what this Auburn team can do defensively. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. Jay, what did you see watching that game? Good, bad, and ugly, man. What did you see?
I mean, in the overall game, the shooting was bad, like you said. And there were several things that Auburn has been better at that they just kind of regressed on against Georgia. But overall, it felt like the most self-inflicted loss that Auburn's had this season. I think that's, it's to Georgia as well. But I think the fact that there were so many easy fixes that Auburn has seemed to move past and kind of that showed themselves again against Georgia makes this loss a little harder to swallow than the other two. To me, it wasn't that, Memphis had a great game plan. USC was the first game on the road and both teams were solid, but Georgia, it seemed like, there wasn't a great game plan. It wasn't like Mike White knocked it out of the park. It was, Auburn has had road games already, and it was just Auburn was, like you're saying, the defensive problems were all, that was just Auburn not locking in and defending like it has been. There were several plays from Cario Quindo and Terry Roberts where they just drove right by Wendell Green, Katie Johnson, whoever their defensive assignment was. It was almost like the game plan last year where they would let some guys drive towards Walker Kessler, except Auburn's shot blocking wasn't, it's not the same level. Janai Brome had a great game, but there were several plays where, and I got a couple of them in the breakdown where, even if Janai Brome comes over to help, Georgia ends up getting an offensive rebound because Janai Brome's out of rebounding position. It was just one of those things where it all just kind of built onto each other. And offensively, it was just as bad. You can't expect, if you're playing these guards who are all 6'1" or less, like Wendell, Zep, KD are, and you're playing them against Cario Oquendo and Terry Roberts and these bigger downhill driving guards, and they're not scoring and they're not defending. That is just not a recipe for success in college basketball. And, when it was Jared Harper and Bryce Brown and they were getting beat on the defensive end, they were coming down and making threes on offense or, getting into a scoring race or whatever. And that makes playing those smaller guards feasible and gives you an advantage in some ways. But if they're shooting, 1 for whatever and 0 for whatever, and it's just not going to get you too far. And playing better defense and limiting the turnovers, like we were saying, Janai Brome had some turnover problems. He played great overall, but he led the starters in assists for the past 2 games. And then he comes into this one and he just, he can't find the passing lanes that he needs to and whatnot. And I think that's a lot of things that Auburn can and should be able to tweak a little bit to beat a team like Georgia. So I think that made it, I don't know, that was the ugly part to me, was just that Auburn, there were so many things that they could have done better and that they just, it seemed like a lackluster effort in several categories that resulted in a loss. But I don't know, there's several things. This team has so much work to do, but correcting the things that ultimately caused the loss to Georgia should be a lot easier to do than fixing these underlying issues that are resulting in a iffy season so far.
Yeah, Bruce was asked after the game. Well, so Janai Brome asked after the game to the media, said that Bruce told the team that a lot of these things are fixable. A lot of these mistakes are fixable. And so Bruce was asked about that after the game. Hey, Janai said a lot of this stuff is fixable. Is that how you see it? And Bruce's answer was, we know the areas we have breakdowns, and we have to try to figure out a way to not let people get downhill so easily. We have to execute, be sharper on the offensive end, finish around the basket. And he did bring something up yesterday that happened in that game. He said we shot 16 free throws, but he said we get the ball inside a lot, shoot around the basket, and then we have to score through contact or get to the foul line. He said, I'd say we missed 15 or 16 shots at the rim, which is true. I don't know, what was going on. But I think Auburn was, let me see. So as the stats constitute layups, which is, essentially a layup or within a couple of feet of the basket, what should be a layup. Auburn was 10 of 22. So, now Georgia, you're going to miss point layups, are not everything is like literally a layup. It's basically if you're trying to lay it up off the glass, or you're trying to lay it up on the rim or finger roll, anything that's kind of within that probably a couple of feet range is a layup. And Auburn was 10 of 22, and a bunch of those misses are Jalen. Jalen was 1 of 9. they just and even Janai had a good game, but 9 of 17. Bruce said after the game he wants him to be 13 of 17. 9 of 17 for somebody like Janai around the basket with his touch is actually probably not as good as he's capable of doing. So yeah, I mean, it was just a frustrating night offensively. I mean, there weren't even, you kind of mentioned lackluster. It sort of felt like that. Just not a ton of good looks. Once again, too many threes. This Auburn team is not good enough to shoot 28 threes. They're not. I mean, this team needs to shoot probably, gosh, I mean, when you get to 23, if you get to 23s for this team, that's probably what this team should be doing. That's the ceiling. They should not be blowing past 23 pointers in a game. 28 is just absurd. And
unless they're hitting them, of course, but
right. I mean, but yes, of course you're gonna have those games where you hit them, and we remember those games where Devin Cambridge would hit 4, and then that would be his total for the next 10 games. But that's just not who they are. That's not a winning strategy. And part of that was Georgia mixing up defenses, going zone, and Auburn feeling like they had to shoot some threes. Certainly, some of those threes happened in the last few minutes. I'd have to go back and add them up, but I'm sure that a handful of those were the last 3-4 minutes when Auburn was down 13. But still just too many threes, and this team cannot do that. Wendell 0 for 6. I don't know what's going on. I like Wendell Green Jr. He got banged up on that West Coast trip or right before that. Seems to be healthy now, but 2 for 12 from your starting point guard, 0 for 6 from 3-point line. That is just bad. And then you throw in there 4 more turnovers from him. He had more turnovers than assists. He did have 3 steals, but I mean, that is that's just not going to cut it. Look, we know Wendell Green is small. We get some of his limitations. Going to the basket is tough for him if he doesn't draw a foul. But he had some decent looks at 3, looks that he can make. And so going 0 for 6 there is brutal. But Jalen really is almost, with the way this team's built, Jalen is just important as Wendell. And Bruce said it after the game. He goes, we can't win if Jalen Williams goes 1 for 9. And he's right. 1 for 9 from the field, 1 for 5 from 3. He did have 7 rebounds. He did have 4 assists. So he did some good things there. He didn't turn the ball over. But with this team, Jalen's got to score. Jalen Williams can't have 7 rebounds, 4 assists, and you go, oh, it's a pretty good game. No. Jalen needs to score 13. That's his role. And so there's, him scoring 5 points and hitting 1 bucket is not good enough. Him and Wendell 3
he didn't score for like the first 35.
Yeah, let's see. When did he score his bucket? He hit 2 free throws with 1:47 left. So that's 2 of his 5 points. And then he hit a 3 with 19:50 right out of halftime. That called play, that time play from Bruce, hit that 3, and you're
that's right.
Absolutely was called by Bruce to try to get Jalen Williams going 100%, and he nails it. Nails it. And then after that, missed jumper, missed three. But here's the crazy thing about Jalen Williams. He hits that 3 with 19:57 in the second half, okay? He took a shot. He took another shot with 17 minutes remaining and missed it. His next shot was a missed 3-pointer with 5.5 minutes to go. So he comes out of halftime, drains a 3, misses a jumper a couple of minutes later, and then I don't have him with another shot attempt until 5.5 minutes left, and Auburn's down 13. That is bonkers. And I don't know who that's on. I don't know that. I don't know what goes into that. I'd have to go back and look at who's taking the shots from 17 minutes to 5.5 minutes. Who's taking the shots for Auburn? But he's got an assist and a block in there, but no shots from Jalen Williams, who should be one of your best offensive players, one of your key guys. and he hits that three and you're down 4, and the next time he takes a shot, you're down 13 with 5.5 minutes to go. And then in the last 5.5 minutes, he missed a three, missed three threes in a 3-minute span in the last 5 minutes, and then made a couple free throws at the end. But Jalen Williams is just, that can't happen. 1 of 9, but going those stretches without getting a shot off is that really can't happen. Those two guys, I don't really look. KD kind of is settling back into his role a little bit. 1 for 5. He's trying to, I think, find his place on the team and not overdo it, clearly, because that's a game right there. Mm-hmm. I think in the past, let's say before the last few games in the past, I think at Georgia, his former place, losing, KD when he was in there, KD would have just started attacking. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, but he was just 1 for 5. But really, you look at Wendell and Jalen in that game, this team, once again, they're not built to have guys that have those kind of nights off. It can't happen. It can't happen where Wendell and Jalen go 3 of 21. And then the other big thing is the guard play. We talked about it a little bit in the first thoughts. Kario Akendo and Terry Roberts combined for 43 points. That's their 2 main guards. Wendell Green, Zep Jasper, Katie Johnson, and Trey Donaldson combined for 16 points. And they basically took the same amount of shots. So Georgia's guards completely dominated Auburn's guards on both ends of the floor, 43-16 from the guard play. And then you combine that with your forward and Jalen going 1 for 9. Yeah, you're going to lose. You're going to lose about every game in the SEC. If your guards get dominated like that, and on top of that, Jalen Williams only scores 5, Auburn will lose the majority of their games in conference play.
Oh, yeah. And I think, speaking on Jalen a little bit as well, and Janai Brome to an extent, but Georgia just did not respect their three-point ability for the most part last night. Even after Janai hit a couple of threes, they were backing off and daring Auburn's bigs to shoot and making sure that they couldn't get in the paint, or, making those paint touches as hard as possible. And Janai Brome, he's just going to be too good unless you have an Oscar Tshiebwe or somebody down low to go up against him, and he's going to get his. But I think that was a big factor in both the recent improvements and the Georgia game. The recent improvements, Jalen Williams has been stretching the court really efficiently, scoring. He's been a go-to option when Auburn's offense has its droughts, and they've just been, dumping it down to Jalen and letting him hit a floater or letting him get a couple of post touches, and in addition to Janai as well. But you get to Georgia and you're not getting any of that floor spacing. You're making life harder on your guards because of that, and especially against a bigger team. Lindell and KD are just going to have trouble driving against big experienced guards. If you get a little bit of extra space with Jalen hitting a few threes, and that changes a lot. But yeah, Jalen, he found a way to be productive, but that's just not going to be enough for him on this team unless Yohan Traore or Chance Westry or Alan Flanagan or somebody else starts being that go-to scorer. Jalen has to score 10 or more.
He has to. And once again, you mentioned Yohan. Once again, Yohan Traore gets in a basketball game, and other than playing minutes, he contributes nothing. He had 1 block in 8 minutes.
He had that block.
He didn't take a shot. He didn't get a rebound. He didn't turn it over. He didn't get an assist. He didn't commit a foul. He literally did nothing but get 1 block in 8 minutes. I'm not being negative on the guy. I'm just saying when he gets in there right now, he's just kind of in there. Nothing's really run to him. He doesn't feel like he can take a shot, be aggressive. It's odd. I almost wouldn't mind if he gets in there at times, like run a play for him for a corner 3. Now, having said that, Auburn was losing that game, and so when Yohan was in, you're not going to run a play for Yohan, but got to figure out a way when he's in there to get something from him. I mean, he can't just be a body that runs up and down the court for 8 minutes and records no stats whatsoever. That's not what Auburn's bench is supposed to be. Yohan Traore is too talented a player to get in the game and do zeros across the board. He's too good for that. The one positive was, was Alan Flanagan, which, Flanagan has a tendency to do this, right? Where he'll play poorly and then he'll come back and he'll have a game, and you're like, there you go. 11 points, 5 of 10 from the field, missed a couple threes. So really he was 5 of 8 from inside the arc, 3 rebounds in 19 minutes. And so, Bruce said after the game he had a really good week of practice. And Bruce even said, Bruce said he told Al, hey, look, even if you didn't do well tonight, you prepared well since the Florida game. You practiced well, and I'm happy with that. And so he was happy with Al's preparation, his attitude, and it seemed to show. He knocked down a couple of buckets, had a big dunk at one point that you thought Auburn had some momentum in the second half. But once again, Al steps up with 11 points, and then Jalen does 1 for 9. If Al steps up with 11 points and Jalen still scores 10, and Wendell doesn't go 2 for 12, like, you win the game. I mean, it's just once again, this team can't have that many people having an off night. But it was good to see Al. It's always good to see Al have a good day. But he was really him and Jedi were really the only ones. I mean, Chris Moore was once again kind of solid, 7 points, 5 rebounds, 2 of them offensive, which I think were like the first possession of the game. But now that's what Chris is going to do. Chris is going to go out there and get you 5 boards, 7 points. You only committed 1 foul, didn't commit a turnover in 23 minutes. So, he did his part. But too many guys just not sure what they're doing or what. So where does Auburn go from here in terms of one of the things Bruce talked about in terms of defending the guards? So you look at Memphis, you look at USC, you look at now Georgia. Talented guards are really hurting Auburn, getting downhill and scoring. One of the things Bruce mentioned was a lot of times they want to be aggressive. The guards will go up over screens and try to force guys downhill, right? Force them into something and then block shots. And he mentioned they don't do as much of going under screens and because that's going to give a guy potentially an open 3. They don't do that a lot. But he mentioned maybe having to change some things up and say, if we're going to play aggressive and go over screens and then help, and then he said the guards aren't getting back in position. They're not able to get back in position, and those guards are driving downhill, and it's become a problem. It's the same way that Wendell was just killing people last year until teams sort of changed it up. But Bruce mentioned maybe having to make it where guards go under screens, and if that gives guys open threes, so be it. But at least that way, if you're going under that screen, you're cutting it off and you're not allowing the downhill driving, but it's not something that he's used to doing. And so I think they're almost at that point. We'll see how they play against Arkansas. By the way, I don't even know. I got home I drove back from the game from Athens, so I got home late, didn't even see. Did Arkansas win on Wednesday night? Did they win their game? Do you know?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they beat Missouri. I don't know the score off the top of my head, but
that's a pretty good win. Missouri's been
they
playing
came
well.
back. I think Arkansas was down maybe 7 at halftime, and they won 74-68.
Nice. So they're coming in with confidence. It's a good ball club. So we'll see how Auburn plays against Arkansas. We know Auburn's different at home, and they're going to have to be this year. Boy, you talk about a home court advantage. They're going to have to be. I mean, they're going to lose some games at home this year. It's not going to be like the last few years where they basically don't lose at home. This team, they're going to falter. The schedule's too tough, but they're going to have to win the majority. But we'll see how they play against Arkansas on Saturday. But I could see if things don't go well Saturday, I could see a little bit of I could see some changes needed to be made, and it could maybe before that. I don't know. I mean, you're only 2 games in, but I think Bruce and this staff know the deficiencies in this team. They know them. And it's just a matter of when do you kind of, I don't want to say hit the panic button, but when do you say, okay, we legitimately have to make a schematic change. We have to make a change from something that we like to do or normally do because this team can't do it. How far into conference play do you go before, for instance, you say, all right, we're going under screens now. We're going under screens. And if they get good open threes, so be it. What do you think? I mean, how far do you go? Or do you think you've got enough data, if you're Bruce and the staff, to know what this team is good at and not good at and start making whatever drastic, whatever significant changes you need to make? Or do you say, hey, we're only 2 games in. These are fixable problems. Let's figure some things out. We don't have to change anything yet. Let's get better. Where do you sort of fall on that?
After last night, it's hard not to say to just, scrap everything, but I don't think that's the complete answer, and I definitely don't think that's what Bruce is going to do. He's seems to always be a guy. I don't remember which year it was, maybe the year after the Final Four, where Auburn had those two pretty ugly losses to Florida and Alabama, and I think Bruce was asked about, are you going to make any changes? And he said, no, I stick with my guys, kind of thing. And I feel like that's the approach he's taken with this roster as well. He's got Zep Jasper playing a lot of minutes still. Wendell Green's still getting his minutes, and all these guys he's allowed to play through struggles that have been here for a while, that were significant contributors last year. And there's, I think all of them can play better than they're playing right now. So I don't think you can completely scrap what you're doing. There's some good to it. Auburn's defensive pressure when it works is really good, but I do think you got to make a little bit of changes with this team. They're just, and it was one of the things that we saw against Florida. Auburn had been switching onto bigs, switching guards and bigs on screens throughout the season. And against Florida, they really stopped that. And I think it was because of how they were defending Castleton, but the approach worked as well. They were back to switching again last night for the most part. There was one play where Katie and Yohan actually switched twice on a one single drive, and it was just, it's ridiculous how much they do it sometimes. But I think you still have to make some changes, and I do think the coaching staff is realizing that. I don't know the exact reason, but we saw a lot of late minutes for Trey Donaldson and Chance Westry last night, Chris Moore as well. So I do wonder if they're, if that's more of a wake-up call for the current starters, the current closers, or if it's, hey, let's see if, Trey Donaldson and Chance Westry can turn on the light here at the end, and if they do deserve some more minutes or whatever. I think that, changing up these rotations and the lineup a little bit could be as significant as anything. If you have Chance Westry out there, Alan Flanagan, Chris Moore, those are guys who can go over screens and defend really well. But I think when you're trying to get Wendell and KD and Zep Jasper to go over screens, they're getting stuck there. It's giving the opponent a little bit of extra time. And, not only are they getting some open threes, but they're getting that driving lane as well. I think there's a lot of this team could do differently. They've kind of changed their approach to rebounding and block shots as well. That's paid off. They're rebounding, extremely well compared to how they were 2-3 weeks ago. So I think that there's, they have been making some changes here and there. I don't know if we're going to see anything significant. I wouldn't mind at this point, like we've been saying, the shooting guard position has been more or less a black hole for Auburn this season. Why not give Chance Westry a little more run there? I can't help but think there's something more going on in that situation that we don't know about for the, borderline 5-star guard just not getting any run when Auburn's backcourt is playing as poorly as it is. But, if Jalen has a 1-for-9 game, why not give Yohan a few more minutes, run a couple of set plays to him, see if you can't get him a lob or an open three. He's an insane athlete and a big dude who can make a couple of threes, see if you can't scheme something up for him. But, it seems like it's already too late to an extent to make a complete change to this team. They're not going to be something that they're not. They're not going to come out and find a way to be some offensive juggernaut or anything like that. So I think you got to tweak this defense. I think you got to find a way to keep relying on the defense. And, that has to be Auburn's bread and butter. The shot blocking is elite. The rebounding is borderline elite at times. The man pressure is really good too when it's, other teams aren't finding a way to use it as an advantage. But I don't know. There's a lot that this team does that, if you play truly elite defense and you have a couple of guards who are subject to go for 20 points on any given night, then you have a real chance to win any game. And I think Auburn has the ingredients to do that. It's just nowhere close to a final product right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. This team is what it is. What it is. They are who they are. And I've kind of told people that have asked me about that, like, hey, look, there's some things about this team that are kind of baked in, and so your expectations need to be at a certain level with this team. But there are things they can tweak. What's crazy is you look at that game last night. Since, for instance, you go back to USC, 23 turnovers on the road, and you lose by 3. Actually, kind of surprising that they only lost by 3 in a game. They had 23 turnovers in that game. But last night, and really similar to Florida in that game, Auburn had 8 first-half turnovers, but only 3 in the second half, similar to Florida. I think Florida, maybe they had 10 or something first-half turnovers, but only a couple in the second half. So it's 2 straight games where they've come out in the first half and they're turning the ball over too much. Second half, they're cutting their turnovers down. They scored 34 points in the second half last night. They shot around 40%. So 2 games in a row, the offense has gotten better in the second half as it's come towards the Auburn bench, but the defense lacks. So it's like they struggle on offense, and then when they start really pressing on offense and putting a lot of energy into their focus and running sets and trying to score on offense, it hurts them on defense. They turn around and they give up 39 points in the second half to Georgia, and they need to put them both together. They need to put them both together. I mean, they shoot, like I said, they shot 40% from the field basically in the second half. 3-point shooting was abysmal, 3 of 17. But like I said, I have to go back and look, but they probably took 6 or 7 of those threes in probably the last 5 minutes, trying to come back in that game. But just 3 turnovers and 10 assists in the second half. I mean, if I told you Auburn had 10 assists and just 3 turnovers and shot, around 40% from the field in the second half, you would take that. You just can't go 3 for 17 from the 3. And the free throw line is the other thing. Auburn's done a really good job this year of getting to the foul line and scoring. I think I saw, let's see, I was looking at a stat the other day actually so a team's free throw attempts as a percentage of their field goal attempts. Auburn came into that game about 40%. So their free throw attempts were about 40% of their total shots. That was in the top 92 percentile in the country. Auburn gets to the free throw line and shoots free throws better than most teams in the country. But then last night, they got there, but they only made 10. In the second half, they only shot 5 free throws. So they got to, again, if you're going to have these guards like KD and Wendell and you're going to attack, but you're a little undersized, you either got to draw contact and get to the line, or you got to finish through contact. So they're trying to struggle through some of those things right now. I mean, last night to me, it was more about defense than offense. The offense is limited. We know who they are. But to give up 76 points to Georgia, a team that came in ranked about 150th in offensive efficiency, that can't happen. I mean, you get dominated. They're Georgia's 2 guards. If nobody else scored, Georgia's 2 guards, Auburn wins that game by 20, by just against the 2 guards. And it's way too many points from the guards. So to me, the defense is what faltered last night. Georgia shot a better percentage than Auburn's giving up field goal wise, 3-point wise. Across the board, Georgia was better on offense than Auburn has been playing on defense. And so I don't know. They've got to figure out a way to do it on both ends of the floor right now. They've got to figure out a way to maintain consistency on defense, even when they're struggling. And then if they pick it up on offense, they got to, I don't know if it's more zone or whatever they got to do, but how do you get Wendell to shoot less threes when it's not going well? I don't think more threes when you're 2 for 12, when you're not making shots, I'm not sure to keep jacking them up when Janai's having the game he is. A lot of frustration last night. I was there. I think it was kind of when the game felt like it was out of reach, probably in the last few minutes, 13-point game. Auburn calls a timeout, a lot of frustration in that bench. And I can imagine rightly so. So I think it's a big challenge right now for that staff to keep them together, because you got a lot of emotions, man. KD, Wendell, and Janai, and there's a lot of emotions. Chris Moore's an emotional guy. You got to keep all those guys in check and figure out how to push through this and figure out some kind of rhythm on offense so that it's not on Wendell to try to create everything. There's just little things. Like Chris Moore's a pretty good spot-up shooter. Why doesn't he get the same kind of plays designed for him that Jalen does? Get him a spot-up 3. Run a play and get him a spot-up 3. There's just little things I think this team can do. But like we've said before, the margin of error with this team is basically none. And so there's things they have to do well. And if they don't, they will lose. They did pretty good on turnovers last night. Can't really complain about that. But too many threes and too many fouls. I mean, you can't send a team to the line 32 times. It's way too many. So got to figure out how to stay with the guards and got to figure out a way to get a little bit better looks and finish around the basket. And that's the other thing. We could be the other side to look at this would be look at Auburn 10 of 20. We talked about layups, 10 of 22 layups. If they go 15 of 22, 16 of 22 from layups, what's the game look like? I mean, it could be a completely different game if they just simply make the chippies that they missed. So that's where I think if you're Bruce and this coaching staff, you have to weigh all that and not go too far one direction in talking about what kind of changes you need to make or how dire the circumstances are. Literally, if you look at Jalen missing some chippies and Al had a great move. I remember specifically a great move in the second half, up and under. Somehow the ball doesn't go in. I mean, if you give them a few of those, it's a down to the wire game. So, it's a little too early to lose your mind on this team yet. I think a few more games we'll sort of see. Like Arkansas is the best team they've played this year, right? They're going to be the most talented across the board. Let's see what they look like. That'll be a good test. I think okay, they lose that game by 15 or something. You're like, okay, there's some real problems. They come out and play well. You're like, okay, look, you're capable. Look what you're capable of doing. You just got to be consistent. So what are your expectations for this game Saturday? I mean, you've seen Arkansas probably a little bit more than I have, but I think Nick Smith, I don't think he played last night. Not sure his status, but ultra talented. I mean, we talked before the season, Bruce said Arkansas had 3 first-rounders. They're going to be – but their first 5 is for sure going to be more talented than Auburn's. But what Bruce counted on and what he hopes is that his depth is good. He hopes that his 9 or 10 deep is good. They're not playing like it right now. So how do you see the matchup against Arkansas on Saturday? Without going to – you're going to have stuff at Auburn Live, so you have to go crazy.
I won't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's similar to what we saw against Georgia. But, I think that a lot of that and what we saw in Auburn's last few games, I think a lot of that is Auburn's style of play. These games are going to be ugly when you're relying on defense and post scoring so much. Auburn doesn't want a fast-paced game with a lot of threes like we grew accustomed to under the Jared Harper years those teams were so much fun to watch. But then again, those weren't true Bruce Pearl teams in the sense of having that physical pressure defense and whatnot. And so I think that creates a bit of an uglier game. So I'm not surprised if that's what we see a lot throughout this season. But if you fix some things that Auburn did against Georgia that we've talked about here, then I think those ugly games become winnable. And you have guys like Wendell Green, Katie Johnson, Janiyah Brome, Jalen Green, Alan Flanagan. All these guys have made big shots at some point in their career, or they've made clutch plays at some point in their career, and they're all experienced. They're all good defenders. If you can play defense like Auburn's capable of, you don't make all these mistakes, you value possessions, you make open shots, you get into close late games with this team, and I think they can win. And I think that's Auburn's best bet against this Arkansas team. Arkansas has some really good guards. Obviously, they have some really good wings as well. They're not so great down low. I think Auburn has an advantage there where Auburn can get something going, especially Janiyah Brome. We'll see what Jalen Williams can do too. But I think Auburn has a path to keeping this game close. And obviously, if they play like they did against Georgia, it's not going to be close. But if Auburn plays good defense, limits turnovers, can find some form of consistent offense and does not have guards going 2 of 12, 0 of 5, 0 of 3, 1 of 6, then this game I think is, very winnable at least. I don't know if Auburn will win at this point, but I think that you can find some success against this Arkansas team. The front court advantage is clear, and Arkansas is not unbeatable, especially if you can defend Ricky Council and Anthony Black.
Yeah. Should be a good game. It should still be a good atmosphere. It's I think it's a 6:30 or 7:30 Central tip, late night tip on SEC Network Saturday night. Plenty of time for fans to get down there and make Auburn Arena what it should be. You call yourself basketball fans. We'll see. You're 1-1. Auburn's struggling a little bit. Don't be a front runner. Okay, show up no matter what. Quickly before we go. Auburn drops to 20. Ken Palm still really likes Auburn. They've got them still at 27th. That's too high to me. They're not that good right now. So Ken Palm's got them at 27th. Torvik, which I like Bart Torvik analytics. Like, he does a good job to me. He's got them at 37th in the country. The net, which is a factor in seeding, has got Auburn now 48th in the country. They dropped 16 spots with the loss to Georgia. They're 48th after last night's games. Still have not played a quad 1 game, and now they're 3-3 quad 2. So Georgia's a quad 2 game, and they're 3-3. So
Memphis not quad 1?
They're not anymore. I mean, they're kind of on the bubble. They could be, Memphis on some analytics, Memphis is, but on the net, they're not.
Gotcha.
But they could squeak in there. I think Memphis is. Let's see where they're at on the net. They are. See where NCAA's got. Where do they got Memphis? So they've got Memphis 62nd. Then the net does.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. Ken Palm's got him 36. Yeah. So the net is being a little bit harder on some of these teams, but then probably look. If you ask me, is Auburn closer to 48th or 27th? I'm saying 48th. I mean. And I don't think
now for sure.
I can argue with you at all. I mean, so the ones that matter, Ken Palm, they're 27th, net, they're 48th. So doesn't get easier, man. You look at the rest of the schedule. Let's see. So if I were going by Torvik analytics, Georgia was the 87th best team in the country now. Ole Miss is 91. South Carolina's not great, and then Vanderbilt. That's it. Like you have 3 other games that are on par with Georgia. Everything else on paper is tougher than what you just did. So got to figure some things out quickly. If you're Auburn, got to figure some things out quickly and not lose too much ground, because we know what the back half of that schedule looks like when you've got Tennessee, Bama, Missouri, Kentucky, Bama again, Tennessee again. That's in the last 9 games of the league. So I would say this team's got they got the month of January, but not even really that. I mean, they need to figure it out probably in the next week. And then they've got the month of January to try to create a good foundation before a really hard back half. If you go through the month of January and you're 500 in the league, I mean, you're probably finishing below 500. So they've got to figure some things out, I think, in the next week on how they're going to attack the next few weeks of this season, and try to figure it out and just win games, win them ugly, win them somehow, push through some of these struggles before it gets really difficult. But Saturday will be an interesting one. Good Arkansas team come back, and maybe that's what this team needs. Come back, play a really talented team, athletic team, and go out there at home and show that you can still be a good athletic team. Get a little confidence back with some athletic ability and try to make some things happen. Maybe speed the game up at times. I don't know. But it'll be an interesting one. All right, so Jay's going to have a recap of Auburn, Georgia at some point, and they'll have a primer up, and we'll talk to Bruce on Friday before Auburn, Arkansas. And have everything you need getting ready for Auburn and Arkansas Saturday night inside of Neville Arena. Should be a big game, first big game of the season inside Neville Arena. I think big crowd should be expected, and they need it. This team needs it. They're not Jabari and Walker. Like they need a crowd. They need the energy to create stuff for them. You saw in Florida when that crowd got into it, it really helped in the second half. So should be a good one. All right, Jay. We'll see what happens on Saturday, man.
Yep. Open for a good one.
Open for a good one. All right. For Jay and Justin, catch it at Auburn Live. Go subscribe, auburnlive.com. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll be back next time. See ya.